funny thing about getting old, your mind doesn't remember everything, but it remembers the things that hurt. The names, the faces, the small details that should have faded long ago, they come back when the world gets quiet. And for me, it always comes back to Tommy Reed. Tommy and I grew up in a small town tucked between cornfields and a lazy river that never seemed in a hurry to go anywhere. Summers were long, and the nights smelled of cut grass and diesel from the freight trains that passed just beyond the hill. We were boys then, all knees and elbows and unshakable dreams. Tommy lived 2 houses down from me, in a small white place with a porch that leaned to one side. His father worked at the sawmill. Mine drove a truck for the county. We were both poor enough to know it, but young enough not to care. We had the same patched jeans, the same hunger to see something more than the fields that surrounded us. He was always the bold one. I was quieter, bookish, my mother said, but Tommy could talk anyone into anything. He was the kind of kid who could make stealing apples feel like a grand adventure. There was a light in him that drew people in. I used to think we'd be friends forever, the way only boys can believe in forever. We built rafts that never floated, caught fish too small to eat, and swore we'd leave town together someday. You and me, kid, he used to say, slapping my shoulder. One day, we'll find a place where nobody knows our names. And I believed him. We made plans foolish, impossible plans. We'd save up from odd jobs, hitch a ride to California, find work near the ocean. It was the kind of dream that keeps you breathing when the days all look the same. But dreams have a way of changing people. When we were 16, a girl named Maggie Carter moved into town. She had the kind of smile that could stop a fight mid-swing. I liked her quietness, the way she looked at things before she spoke. Tommy liked her too, but for different reasons. He liked the way she made him feel noticed. At first, we both tried to hide it. We were boys, and loyalty meant something. But you can't hide the way your eyes follow someone. I asked her to the church fair one summer evening just to talk, I told myself. Tommy said nothing, but the way he looked at me afterward, half a smile, half a wound, I should have known that something had cracked between us. He didn't come by for a while after that. When he finally did, he acted like nothing had happened, but the easy laughter between us was gone. There was something in his tone now, a kind of edge I hadn't heard before. Then, a week later, he told me he'd gotten a job at the mill, said he was saving up to buy a car. A real one, he said. Something that can take me out of this place. We were 17 then. I was finishing school, thinking about college, maybe journalism, maybe teaching. Tommy laughed at that. You always had your head full of words, he said. Words don't get you far in the real world. I didn't argue. I never did. That fall, Maggie started working part-time at the diner by the train tracks. I'd stop by to see her after class, and sometimes Tommy would show up too, grease still on his hands from the mill. The 3 of us would sit in the back booth, drinking coffee we couldn't afford and talking about the future like we owned it. But somewhere between those coffee cups and closing time, something changed. Tommy started talking big about heading west, about how he'd make it on his own, how he didn't need school or anyone's approval. I admired his confidence, but it started to sound more like anger than ambition. One night, I told him I was thinking of asking Maggie to go steady. He went quiet, just looked at me, the way a dog looks at another dog, holding its bone. Then he said, "You sure that's a good idea?" I didn't understand what he meant then, but a week later, Maggie stopped returning my calls. I found out through a friend that she'd gone for a drive with Tommy one evening. Just a drive, they said, but I knew what that meant. And I knew, too, that the boy who'd once shared everything with me had crossed a line we couldn't come back from. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just shrugged, that same cocky grin on his face. "You should have known better," he said. "You were never going to keep a girl like her." I can still remember the taste of that moment, the bitterness, the disbelief, the sudden understanding that the world isn't as fair as you think it is when you're young. We stopped talking after that. Weeks passed, then months. By the time graduation came around, Tommy had already left town with Maggie. I stood there on the football field, cap in hand, watching the horizon where the road disappeared. The wind was warm, the sky clear. Somewhere out there, my best friend was chasing the life we dreamed about together. Only now, he was doing it without me. Years have a strange way of folding in on themselves. You think you've left something behind, but it waits for you, patient, unmoving, until one day you stumble right back into it. That's how memory works. It doesn't fade, it hides. After Tommy left, the town felt smaller. The same streets, the same faces, but the air had changed. I tried to fill the emptiness with work, school, anything that kept me from thinking too much. I got a scholarship to a community college 2 towns over, and for the first time, I thought maybe I'd outrun the past. But I carried it with me, every class, every bus ride, every letter I never sent. There were nights I'd lie awake in that cramped dorm room, wondering where he was. Was he still with her? Was he happy? I'd tell myself I didn't care, but I did. I cared more than I wanted to admit. 2 years went by. I came home one Thanksgiving, and my mother told me she'd heard Tommy was back. Working at the garage now, she said. He and that girl didn't last. Something inside me twisted when I heard that. Not satisfaction, no, it wasn't that simple. It was something colder. Like hearing that a part of your youth had come undone, and you couldn't even feel sorry for it. I saw him a few days later, by chance, outside Miller's Hardware. He looked different, older, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with time. There was oil on his hands, a cigarette behind his ear, and a look in his eyes that reminded me of those long drives we used to talk about. But now, it was just talk. We didn't say much, just nodded, like 2 men acknowledging the ghost of something that used to matter. He said he'd bought a second-hand truck. I told him I was finishing up school. There was an awkward silence. Then he said, "Guess you got what you wanted, huh?" I didn't answer. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. He laughed, not cruelly, just emptily, and said, "Maggie's gone. Packed up and left one morning. Didn't even say goodbye." I wanted to ask why, but I didn't. He looked like he didn't have an answer himself. That was the last time we spoke for a long while. Life moved on, as it always does. I finished college, found a job at a small local paper. I married a woman named Ellen, a school teacher with a gentle heart and a quiet smile. We built a life together, modest but steady. But sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself wondering about Tommy, where he'd gone, what became of him. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't help it. Some people leave footprints that don't wash away, no matter how much time passes. Then, one summer afternoon, about 10 years after we'd last spoken, I saw his name again, this time in the newspaper. A small article on page 7. Local mechanic killed in roadside accident. The words didn't make sense at first. I read them again and again, but they just sat there, like stones in my chest. He'd been driving that same second-hand truck, late at night, coming back from a bar outside of town. The paper said he'd been drinking. The truck skidded off the road and hit a tree. I sat there at my desk, the hum of the office fading into nothing. For a long time, I just stared at the words, trying to match them with the boy I'd once known, the boy with the easy laugh and the wild dreams. At his funeral, there weren't many people. His parents were gone by then. A few men from the garage stood in the back, heads bowed. I stood by the casket and looked down at him, older, heavier, but still Tommy. Still the friend who'd once shared my dreams and stolen my heart's first love. Ellen held my hand, but I couldn't cry. I thought I would, but the tears never came. It wasn't grief that filled me, it was something heavier. Regret, maybe, or recognition. Because standing there, I realized that in all those years, I'd never really stopped being his friend. Not in the quiet corners of my mind, not in the places I didn't show anyone. After the service, I walked to the river where we used to fish as boys. The water was slow that day, the sky a dull gray. I sat on the bank and thought about all the things we never said. And that's when it hit me, the truth I'd been avoiding for years. Tommy hadn't betrayed me. Not really. He'd betrayed himself. He'd been chasing something that wasn't real, that feeling of being alive, of being seen, of mattering. I used to think he took those things from me, but maybe he just didn't know how to keep them for himself. We were both running from the same thing all along, the fear that we'd never become the men we dreamed we'd be. I left a flower on his grave before I went home, just one, and as I walked away, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of summer fields and diesel and dust, the smell of our childhood. For a moment, I could almost hear his voice again, calling my name from across the years. You know, when you reach 80, people think you've figured life out. They look at your wrinkles like they're maps, as if each line explains something about the journey. But truth is, most of us die with more questions than answers. It's been more than 60 years since Tommy left this world, and yet, some nights, I still find myself talking to him, not out loud, just quietly. In that place inside, where voices live after the people are gone, I tell him things I never could when we were young. About the choices I made, the roads I took, the way life never really turns out the way you think it will. I tell him I forgave him long ago, and sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, I imagine he forgave me too. Because here's the thing I've come to believe. Every friendship that ends, even the ones that break you, leaves something behind. A lesson, a scar, a piece of yourself that learns to love differently, softer, maybe, or more carefully. After his death, I carried him with me in ways I didn't expect. Every time I met someone bold and reckless, I saw a bit of him. Every time I stood on the edge of a decision and hesitated, I thought of the way he'd just leap, laughing, daring the world to stop him. And though it hurt, I was grateful for that, because Tommy taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way, that love, friendship, loyalty, they aren't guarantees, they're choices. Choices you have to make over and over again, even when people fail you. Ellen passed away a few years back. Cancer, quick and quiet, the way she lived. After she was gone, I moved into this small house near the edge of town. It's not much, just a porch, a few old chairs, a kitchen that smells like coffee and dust, but it's enough. Some mornings, I sit outside before the sun comes up, watching the mist roll off the fields. I can almost see us there, two boys in hand-me-down jackets, laughing at nothing, planning a future too big for our small town. And sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd handled things differently, if I'd forgiven him sooner, if I'd written that letter I started 100 times and never finished. But regret, I've learned, is just memory wearing heavier shoes. It doesn't move you forward. It just treads the same ground, again and again, until you finally learn to stop walking. One evening, not long ago, I visited the old cemetery again. The grass had grown tall around the headstones. His grave marker was simple, just his name, and the years that barely seemed enough to hold a whole life. I stood there a long time, longer than I meant to, and I said, "You got your wish, you know. You left this town. You're part of the wind now." And as silly as it sounds, I swear the wind stirred right then, just a little, like an answer or maybe a laugh. There's an ache that comes with age, not in the bones but in the heart. It's the ache of remembering too much, of knowing that every joy and every sorrow had its time and passed. And all that's left are the echoes, the voices of those we loved and lost, the sound of a friendship that once felt unbreakable. I think about him sometimes when I see young people walking down Main Street, two friends, shoulder to shoulder, laughing like they have all the time in the world. I want to tell them to be kind to each other, to mean what they say, to forgive easily, because one day they'll blink and it'll all be memory. But I don't say anything. I just smile and let them be. The world needs its dreamers, its fools, its boys with big plans and untamed hearts. And as for me, well, I'm just the old man sitting here, telling stories to an empty porch, stories about a boy named Tommy, about love and betrayal, and the fragile beauty of friendship. People think betrayal is about losing someone else, but really, it's about losing a version of yourself, the one who believed the world would always stay the same. If I could go back, I'd tell that boy, the one I used to be, that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. That sometimes the only way to keep someone alive is to let go of the hurt they left behind. The sun's almost gone now, the lights soft, golden, the kind of light that makes even the roughest things look gentle. I close my eyes, and I can see us again, me and Tommy, sitting by the river, the water shimmering like a secret. He's laughing at something, I said, tossing pebbles into the current. And for a heartbeat, it's all still there, the youth, the trust, the endless summer. Then the vision fades, and the evening settles in. I sit back, breathe deep, and whisper into the quiet, "Goodbye, old friend." And somewhere out there, carried on the breeze, I swear I hear him answer, just a faint, familiar laugh, disappearing into the wind.